Cindy Gallop has built her career blowing up taboos and forcing industries to face what they otherwise might want to ignore. She ran global accounts at BBH. You founded their New York office. You were named Advertising Woman of the Year. And then in 2009, Cindy, you gave a TED Talk in which you repeated the phrase, "Come on my face," 6 times. That went viral. And with that, you launched Make Love Not Porn and embarked upon a mission to challenge stigma, fight cultural double standards, build legitimacy, create safe spaces. I've invited you here today because you actively fight every day for social license for your business. You know what it is to be told that your business is too dangerous to fund, too taboo to regulate, too uncomfortable to talk about. And right now, wine, like sex, it's a pleasure industry, but it's under scrutiny. We've got health narratives, shifting values, moral panic, and regulatory theater are all circling around us. So when I sat down to plan this podcast series, I was like, I need you to come on. I need you to be willing to talk to us about what it means to work in an industry that is beset by all of these challenges and how you are making that work and how you're making it work and continuing to grow and expand and find new ways to change the culture around sex. Cindy, I could not be happier to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Polly. I'm thrilled to be here.
I am lucky enough to have been able to interview you before, so I'm going to skip over all that introductory bullshit and let's just use our time to best effect. All right. You know, we have so many discussions of moderation in wine right now. And I've got 2 daughters who are in their 20s. And I know that one reason that moderation is happening with our younger potential audiences does, in many of their cases, tie into mental health and safety. And it's an interesting space. We're talking with you about the work that you're doing around the harmful effects of pornography versus a positive discourse around sex, right? That I think how those two things would really tie in together. My daughters are cognizant of how much they drink on a given night when they're out socializing because they have to stay safe. You know, how do we reconcile something that should be pleasurable, delightful? It should, if it's a tiny form of positive escape, you know, it should be great for our endorphins, with the perception and actual harm that can come from that.
Well, you know, let me unpack that a bit, Polly, because I want to be as helpful to our listeners as I can in this context. And so, first of all, you know, I think there's something very interesting about, you know, in the context of the wine industry, exactly what I've been saying to the business and financial world for many, many years about the adult industry, which is the answer to everything that worries people is not to shut down, censor, clamp down, block, repress, legislate. The answer is instead to open up. Okay, and I want to talk about this specifically in the context of your industry, wine, because you know, as with any other industry that is fearful of regulation and things clamping down and repressing and so on, there can be a tendency to think that you have to push back against all of that. But actually, when I say open up in this context, I mean open up to reinventing wine culture and therefore the way the industry operates in a way that will prove much more productive and profitable for everybody. And what I mean by that is, so I just, last week I was in the UK and I was speaking at a really amazing business festival called Ideas Fest. So Ideas Fest was started by a wonderful woman, Frankie James. I think this is the third one. This is the third year it's operated. It's what she describes as Glastonbury for business. So she had this great idea of what if you take entrepreneurs, investors, business people, and bring them all together for 2 days of amazing talks and sessions and workshops, but do it in a field. And so it is literally a festival for business. And I watched a really amazing panel of all women. My friend Emma Sale, who is the founder of Killing Kittens, which holds adult events, she hosted and curated a phenomenal space at Ideas Fest, which was the unapologetic tent. I spoke on several panels in the unapologetic tent, as you can imagine. But this particular panel, which I was in the audience for, was it was called Dry Connections, and it tackled the very relevant business issue of how do you network and build business relationships when you're sober. But what was really great about this panel was that there was a spread of 5 women on stage, and they were all coming at this from different angles. And one of them was a woman called Amanda Thompson, who is the founder of Naughty Wines. Naughty as in Noughty. And honestly, I was not familiar with Amanda or Naughty before this panel. And I really loved how she talked about the fact that, she is someone who loves wine, and she founded Naughty simply because she wanted a really good quality option for those occasions when she might want to enjoy wine but make it alcohol free, but absolutely continues as a very happy and discerning wine drinker. And so she talked about how with Naughty and other alcohol free options, you can actually sort of manage drinking enjoyment, but in a way that means for example at a business networking function, make your first drink an alcohol free one, begin doing business the way you need to, and in due course you can then go on and have another as everyone relaxes. And I just think there's something very interesting in opening up to the way the world is now and going, how can we be part of reinventing wine culture? And very importantly, Polly, because this is something I talk about, I've been talking about for literally decades, how can we reinvent aspirational wine culture? And the reason I say that is because, as I say, for many, many years, I've talked, especially to my industry, advertising, marketing, brand building, about the huge opportunity we have to reinvent aspirational culture. And I especially talk to my industry about this because we invented aspiration. We made people want things, but we made people want material things. Back in the Mad Men days, we made you want the right house, the right car, the right watch. Today, we have a huge opportunity to reinvent aspirational culture, to make people want things that will be better for them, will improve their lives, and as they see the beneficial impact on their lives, will build a far stronger bond between brand and consumer. And so I would really encourage the wine industry to think about how you can reinvent aspiration around wine. And, that means and I think there's especially a really interesting opportunity with Gen Z, wine drinkers, absolutely, first of all, and I think you and I have talked about this before, making wine much more accessible, because it's still, let's face it, a very snooty business in many ways, and you are looked down on if you don't, have the knowledge and the understanding and,
100%.
I think that there's something very interesting in going, these days, people identify as different kinds of drinkers and wine drinkers, and, just as with Amanda Thompson, the naughty example, you can identify as somebody who chooses not to drink in some contexts and chooses to drink in others. And incidentally, I think there's a huge opportunity in being very open and honest about that, and actually suggesting those contexts to people who have never thought about them. As opposed to, because the wine industry has, and sorry, I know I'm going on and on. I'll shut up in a moment.
Just keep going. Easiest interview I've ever done.
Yeah, because the wine industry, and by the way, obviously I talk as an outsider here, but that does mean it's a wholly objective eye. The wine industry has been in this oiled groove of presuming that people who drink wine regularly. People who like certain types of wine want to drink a lot of it, constantly. And I think there's something really interesting in looking at the completely new landscape of wine drinking today, especially for Gen Z, who are, the consumers and the purchasers of the future, and going, how can we empathize? How can we reflect? How can we represent? How can we educate in a way that actually means that we reinvent what is aspiration around wine in a way that will tremendously benefit our business?
So what's funny about this discussion is that today I'm a little stressed out getting into this podcast because I am officially launching the next phase of work. So I still have 5 forests, but I'm launching a business today that's called Wine Culture Lab. That is basically the first ever culture studio for the wine industry that is specifically saying what is happening is that we are losing our cultural relevancy, and we're losing that with the next generations. And then it becomes much easier for those regulations to take hold or for that social license to be at risk because we have no meaning in the lives of so many. Generally, right now they're falling into about under 40 or under 35s. And it's a whole shift in all of the paradigm of how you do business with an audience, how you communicate, how you represent. I mean, you talk about like opening doors, right? And you're talking about wine as occasions. And the thing is that none of us live in this perfect, occasional bubble or preference bubble. Like we all have multifacets of our personalities. And I've been talking about empathy for years, right? What we have to do in any industry is understand at the core, well, on the one side, for the people who are, who are sober curious, who are non-drinking, well, when, where, why, how? I mean, I went through 2 pregnancies. I love wine. There was periods, 80 weeks of my life when I couldn't drink, and it would have been really nice to have felt like I was still welcome in spaces. And at the time I was, fortunately, but it can be that somebody's running a marathon next week. I mean, there's so many reasons that on a given day we do or do not do something, and the space needs to be made there for them as well. And a lot of that does come down to looking at the issues of young people. And this is me just going off on a tangent. I get super frustrated when I see my 5 Forest clients talk about things like the wine club, right? So the wine club is you sign up and you get 12 cases, 12 cases, woohoo, 12 bottles delivered every X number of months. And I'm like, well, they don't have any money and they don't have any space. No. So where are they going to put your 12 bottles of wine every 3 months?
No, exactly, Polly. And let me give you one example, okay, of what I mean when I talk about reinventing aspirational wine culture, okay? I would like to see your industry completely flip its attitude towards boxed wine.
Oh, me too. I agree.
Because for Gen Z, if you want to be empathetic and you want to cultivate the wine drinkers of the future, box wine is your opportunity to present it to them as, this is how you fit with a lifestyle where you might want to drink one day, you might not want to the next, and you have an opportunity to have a wine storage scenario that means that actually that wine can last way longer than if
Yeah.
you've opened a bottle.
I completely agree with you. There was one instance, I think it was 2021, when Tablas Creek launched a premium wine in a bag. So and it just flew out the doors. We've had in 2020 there was something that was wonderful. It was called the Bagnum. That was like a very large Capri Sun. And also it's travelable. In many cases there's like less waste. We don't have the issues of the bottle weights. I consider talking about wine all day long.
I'm sorry, and let me just say about that create a really cool boxed wine, and that becomes Gen Z's affordable and easily incorporated into small apartments version of the wine fridge. That's a different kind of, interior decor aspiration.
Well,
make the wine box an installation.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things, we've just done a report on trust and under 35-year-olds, and one of the things that comes out is trust as an identity marker is really important. So wearing a brand where that brand is doing all of the right things, or going out and buying Gap jeans 2 weeks ago because of that Cat's Eye ad that they ran, whatever it might be. And this option to actually use, as Barbara Gorder will say, use your packaging as part of the strategy, that you create something that in and of itself is decorative, is gorgeous, is an identity marker, however that looks. I want to kind of talk about education a little bit, because this is something that I think wine can use to think more about. So in the context of Make Love Not Porn, you actually have to undertake a ton of education around topics that are hard to message. They're not going to get, as we saw today, ChatGPT is just not going to say some of those words. They're not going to be indexed. They can't go out across all platforms. How do you actually message to build awareness for Make Love Not Porn?
So it's a great question, Polly, because the answer is with extreme difficulty, really? In the sense that we are banned from advertising and promoting ourselves anywhere.
Well, and you just had to beg to get your Instagram account back, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so I have predominantly relied on earned media, so obviously, media interviews, podcasts, news coverage, et cetera, et cetera. And it's interesting because those demonstrate how very media and advertising sensitive Make Love Not Porn is. Because when people find out about us, they want us, as the documentary to porn's Hollywood movies. So just one example is I gave a keynote at South by Southwest London back in June about Make Love Not Porn and our forthcoming Make Love Not Porn Academy, our sex education extension. And in the audience was a journalist from Neue Zeitung, I'm afraid I can't pronounce their name, but NZZ, which is the biggest daily German language publication in Switzerland. And she, came up to me after my talk and said, I'd love to interview you for NZZ. And I went, absolutely. So she interviewed me, and the interview ran back in July. And the day the interview ran, Switzerland shot up to be our fourth highest source of traffic to Make Love Not Porn. Our highest is always the US, followed by the UK, followed by Germany. Switzerland knocked Canada out of fourth place. And bear in mind the relative sizes of those two countries.
Yeah.
Our traffic spiked, our sign-ups spiked, our revenue spiked. Because the moment Switzerland read about Make Love Not Porn, Switzerland wanted what we do. So it is enormously frustrating that we are not able to like target and market and advertise ourselves. But basically, in order to get the word out, I seize every opportunity that's offered in the media, and the point about that, Polly, and I think this is the um, you know learning experience for the wine industry is, you know, when you are doing something enormously interesting, people want to cover you. So that's the joy for me of earned media, because I can't afford to pay a PR team, and so all of the requests are inbound. You know, as an industry, do something really, really interesting, and you will absolutely get the message out in the
I
same
think
way.
though, I think that you have hit the nail on the head. So like we talk a lot about differentiation, right? And kind of in wine existing within our little bubble, our little echo chamber. So if you're in wine, you're talking on wine podcast, one of the things that we're always trying to get at is say, do something that goes beyond wine. Like have a story that goes well beyond wine so that you can get into the media spaces where your competitors don't exist. You can get onto the podcast about fabulous things you're doing. There's one winery in Napa, if I recall correctly, that does falconry that I'm like, awesome. Like, I don't really care what it
Yeah.
is, but just give us something that we're like, ooh, I've never heard that story before.
Yep.
But also, I think some of it is that there are a lot of people within the wine industry who at heart love agriculture, right? We want to be farmers. We don't want to be sitting in front of a camera. The thought of being on podcasts are just petrifying. So, for you, you came out of the ad industry, but you were working through Make Love Not Porn with a lot of people who are really comfortable putting themselves in front of a camera. Like, how do people actually how do they test? How do they find that thing? How are they willing to share the thing that maybe they weren't going to share before? How do they undergo some sort of ad hoc media training? How do they get as comfortable sitting there and saying, okay, I'm going to talk with you about something that maybe you've never heard of before. Maybe you've only heard the bad things about it. Maybe you're coming in with like morbid curiosity. How do you create the space, do well in it, and turn it around?
So I think that this is a really interesting analogy with what the wine industry needs to do, because to your point, and for those of our listeners who may not be aware of this, Make Love Not Porn is an entirely user-generated real-world sex video sharing platform. So we are a unique window onto the funny, messy, loving, wonderful sex that we all have in the real world, with sex education through real-world demonstration. And the vast majority of our Make Love Not Porn stars, as we call our contributors, had never ever filmed themselves doing anything sexual before ever. They're doing it for us because they believe in our social mission. They want to see more open, healthy dialogue around sex. They want to see the shame, guilt, embarrassment taken out of it. We have a revenue share business model where our members subscribe to rent and stream our real world sex videos. Half the revenue goes to our Make Love Not Porn stars. We've had a number of Make Love Not Porn stars come across Make Love Not Porn, be so wildly excited they've uploaded videos without even realizing they can make money out of them.
Wow.
Because they're just so passionate about our social mission. And so, I think that is a really interesting analogy for the wine industry, because for a vineyard or a wine label, what you want to do is you want to stand for something. And again, Polly, I think that this absolutely relates back to what I was saying about the opportunity to reinvent aspirational wine culture, because it's not enough just to be. We've been operating since whenever. We have this amazing way, et cetera, et cetera. You need a philosophy of who you are and why you're doing what you're doing that will make people go, this is my why. I am, because I share the same values. I share the same point of view, and then they will absolutely become ambassadors for you, because they will be badging themselves as members of your community. I designed Make Love Not Porn to be a badge brand. Because when you're a member of our community, whether you are a Make Love Not Porn star or, a member who watches their videos, what that says about you is, I'm good in bed the way it really counts, the real world sex way. I stand for good sexual values and good sexual behavior. And so I think it's interesting for different wine brands to think about, if we're a badge brand, what does that say about the people who love our wine? And by the way, it is absolutely not, but because I think for too long, the wine industry has been on, we are in transmit mode, you, the consumer, are in receive mode, bow down and revere, And so I think it's really interesting to ask yourself that question, wine brands, which is, if we're a badge brand, what does it say about somebody that they love and drink our wine, and it is not they're a discerning connoisseur of wine?
Well,
Okay, that is absolutely
I would go a little bit farther. I would actually say, so like if we're looking at it and wine is being demonized, right? That we're seeing this across press, across countries. So I would say, yes, as individual brands, being able to badge yourself is phenomenal, but actually as an industry, I think that we could even move that up more and say, what does it mean to be a wine drinker? What does, wine as the preferred drink all on its own say about a person? Because I do think that collective action is really important for de-demonizing, for de-villainizing. And then I think that it's not just, it's funny because you got wine, beer, spirits, and I think behind the scenes there's all an awareness of what's going on. But I do think that there needs to be a way of how do individually and collectively we take hold of a narrative that without us having some kind of control can very easily spin beyond the media that we have comfort with, we have access to, we have voices on. Because of course, one of the things that happens if we look at, for instance, cigarettes, well, the minute that cigarettes, which, we all know cigarettes are harmful, but the minute that cigarettes were deemed harmful, then the cigarette industry in and of itself loses the voice to participate in those conversations. So that's where I would be taking it, is how, what are your thoughts on taking a whole industry and actually shifting the narrative from what is being put upon you by the press who have gotten a hold of anti-wine messaging and using aspiration, using trust, using transparency, using sustainability, whatever it is, to actually reframe this as something that, just like sex, if done right, if done the real way, if not performative, if not this, it doesn't have to be harmful.
I think that's a terrific idea, Polly. And I will just say that I think that someone needs to undertake that mission in the first instance on behalf of the wine industry without involving the wine industry. And I'll tell you why I say that. Because I think that I think you're absolutely right that needs to happen. I think it's eminently achievable with a real cutting edge vision of how to reframe wine and being a wine drinker. And precisely because of that, it needs to be led by somebody or a very small number of somebody's with that vision, proved to work, and then bring the rest of the industry in. Because as we all know, trying to get a ton of people doing things the same way for centuries, literally, to collaborate on a whole new vision ain't going to work. And so someone has to set the agenda for the entire industry, set the North Star, set the vision, begin making that work, and then the industry will absolutely rally around and come in underneath that.
Yeah, I think, and like to make them relevant, like that is the thing, is how do we retain our relevance? So which then leads me to a question in general, through the work that you did in advertising, everything that you're doing right now, all the people that you're talking to through Make Love Not Porn and the media, What are you seeing right now as separating the industries that are really able to adapt and retain relevance right now from those who are being regulated out of that relevance, who are simply falling to the wayside, who, they're not maintaining?
Honestly, there are very few success stories out there at the moment, you know, and and that is ridiculous because that should not be the case. But I mean, I'll give you one really obvious one, which is the world of luxury right now and luxury fashion absolutely tanking, you know, and that is an industry made up of a ton of really storied brands. And by the way, storied brands, many of them with very big budgets at their disposal, who cannot seem to dig themselves out of the hole they're in. You know, and so you ask me that question. I honestly cannot point to another industry and go do it like them because nobody is, and that's the huge opportunity. Be the case study for the rest of the world.
I mean, you travel a lot. I live outside of the US. I can't help but question all of my own assertions, all of my own beliefs about culture and relevancy when right now culture feels very fragmented. We talk about culture, and of course, there's always the question of culture, but whose culture? Which culture? I mentioned the cat's eye thing earlier, but of course, there were an awful lot of people who loved the Sydney Sweeney ad because that fell within their culture. How do you think that you balance safe choices with taking a stand? Like American Eagle, they took a stand. Well, you don't have to like the stand, but they took a stand with that shitty Sydney Sweeney ad. It doesn't appeal to me. I've got the other place that I can go. Like how is there even does anybody care about being safe? I think that a lot of brands, I think a lot of heritage brands are uncertain how to act, and so they're just kind of paralyzed by indecision because if they take a stand, especially in America right now, someone's going to call them out, another person's going to get pissed.
Well, honestly, I think that's a false assumption because the fact of the matter is, the moment you say and make it clear not for everybody wants you. And that especially applies in the context of aspiration. And so the worst thing any brand or industry can do is be too concerned about what everybody else is doing. Just do what's right for you.
Well, I'm going to give you an example. I haven't seen you or talked to you since this happened. Jag and the Jag rebrand. Something we were watching, I was completely fascinated by, and watching that arc of how it was perceived, and then them firing the agency, and then somebody else getting canned, and then there being another replacement. And now, like, the whole experience of sitting back and watching that Jag rebrand was fascinating. Looking at it from your perspective with years in advertising, what's your take on something like that? I mean, it was crazy. It was bold. It got a lot of attention.
What I would say about an exercise like that is the single most important thing is whatever you do, the entire company needs to stand behind it.
Can you just say that again, like really loud for the people in the back? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, nothing will destroy brand credibility quicker than, something going out there, being controversial, whatever form, and the company leadership absolutely crumbling in the face of that. So, it doesn't matter what it is, and it doesn't matter, by the way, whether, anybody thinks it's right or wrong. The key thing is do something like that. The entire company has to get behind it and stay behind it.
Yeah. I think that where I find that to be super interesting, and why I do say that everybody needs to hear that, is that right now we have a lot of industries. I do think that there are actors in wine, I won't point a finger at the industry broadly, who are in a state of what do we do and kind of chasing the shiny new toy, very tactics driven, very short term. And I think that when we're talking about the whole team standing behind you, that is very much articulation of our goals, why we're doing it, what the long-term plan is. Like that is not a tactical move. That is a long-term, turning a corner.
Absolutely.
And just so very important. So, okay, you've talked about Make Love Not Porn Academy. I want to talk about this because I think that this notion of teaching people early how to behave well with something that could be good or could be harmful has a lot of tie-ins to how we present alcohol in the home, how we talk about it to our children, how we say, ooh, steer clear of it, or, oh, here's how you be responsible. So talk to me a little about what you're doing with Make Love Not Porn Academy.
Sure. No, and I think that that's a terrific point, Polly, by the way. So for our listeners, I had the idea for Make Love Not Porn Academy 10 years ago, which is how long investors have refused to fund it. And I had the idea because parents and teachers began reaching out to me from day one of Make Love Not Porn, begging me for the 0 to 18 and beyond sex education extension of what we do. At the same time, over the now nearly 17 years that I've been working on Make Love Not Porn, I've built up a huge network all around the world of brilliant sex educator friends who face all the same challenges I do. Their content gets blocked on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Their accounts get suspended. They can't promote themselves. And so I conceived the idea of MakeLoveNotPorn.academy as an aggregator hub for the best of the world's sex education content that is already out there, but is being blocked, censored, and deplatformed everywhere. So our mission at Make Love Not Porn Academy is to organize the world's sex education information to make it universally accessible and useful. This is a deliberate paraphrase of Google's original mission statement. Organize the world's information to make it universally accessible and useful, because today, Google is not doing that in this area. The algorithm is biased, it's censoring. Parents and teachers tell me all the time that they cannot find the resources they need when they search for them. And so we are building the Google of sex ed. And it's absolutely designed to deliver age-appropriate sex education from cradle to grave. This is like the entire life cycle of, education that will help parents talk to their kids about sex as early as possible. Age-appropriate lesson plans for classrooms and schools, all the way through, menstruation, menopause, fertility, et cetera, et cetera. And I have to tell you, I've been talking about this for 10 years. Parents have said to me, I'll pay anything for that. And we were finally able to make it happen because I raised a small amount of equity crowdfunding last year, which you invested in, Polly. So I'm yes. Very, very happy about that. And we also, alongside, raised a round of bridge funding on a safe note. And that has enabled us to finally design and build Make Love Not Porn Academy. We've just completed the build of a minimum viable product platform. We are now just, going through all of that, testing it before we invite in. We have over 100 educators on standby, ready to populate the platform with their content, their products, and then we'll take it live, hopefully, fingers crossed, in a couple of months' time. And so, you're absolutely right to draw the analogy because, as part of, reinventing the future of wine, reinventing aspirational culture around wine, starting early and actually helping, parents and schools educate about, alcohol and alcohol management, could be enormously beneficial for the wine industry.
Well, you see it on TikTok. So there's some fascinating, I love TikTok so much. I don't remember his name. The British guy who's the etiquette guy. Have you seen him? He's like how to eat asparagus and how to, so
I haven't, no, but I can imagine, yeah.
But there's a lot of, another place that you can see it, which has nothing to do with wine at all, is sexual health content on TikTok, where what happens is that you've got doctors who are going in, they're answering questions, they're doing it in a language that is appropriate for a younger audience, where it's the idea that this is the audience wants to know something, but they can't get those answers at home, right? I think that that's one thing that's very, very interesting if we're working in any regulated industries, is saying, okay, how can we provide the education or the content to people who are curious, but perhaps they don't have a super proactive, mom who's willing to reach out to somebody to get it. But then the other question that I'm curious about with Make Love Not Porn Academy actually has to do with the language. Because, if we talk about alcohol and if we talk about sex, there's a whole lot of levels of language. And I think about even being able to search for something. So if I'm thinking about all the different language for any particular sex act, like that's just going to be so dialectic, that's going to be so cultural, that making that easy to find so that people can actually get what they need seems to me like that would be an interesting technical challenge. And then I apply that to something like wine, where wine is so entrenched in wine language. And how do you actually conform language so that it's literally just searchable to your audience?
So what's interesting about what we're doing with the Academy is we are solving what is a huge problem on every social platform and in search, which is that all of the language associated with sex, especially female lens, sexual health and wellness, is censored. That is why you see sex spelt SEGGS on TikTok all the time, because actually, no, people cannot talk frankly in education about sex on TikTok because they're censored. The moment we started our Make Love Not Porn TikTok, which we called Make Love Not Porn because of this issue, we were shadow banned the moment we set it up.
Really?
So no, in the world at large, this is a huge problem because you cannot find anything because it's all banned or censored. There's a book out called Algo Speak, which is about ridiculous lengths that sexual health and wellness practitioners and educators have to go to try and talk about the work they're doing.
Yeah.
The world is going backwards as we speak. So that is why I say at the Academy we're building the Google of sex ed. We are aggregating education from a ton of brilliant sex educators. And by the way, a lot of them are Gen Z. Gen Z absolutely wants to educate its own generation. They're coming at it from lots of different angles. And so when I say, we're on a mission to be the Google of sex ed, I mean that, because you can search for anything and you will find it. And that is not the case on Google.
How do you get around regulations for what can and can be presented to different age groups?
There are no regulations. Okay,
Really?
so bear in mind, first of all, Make Love Not Porn Academy is a private company. Okay, I own it. Okay, so it's my own platform. Secondly, unlike Make Love Not Porn, everything on Make Love Not Porn Academy is safe for work. Okay, this is just education. It's all safe for work. Okay. Thirdly, and you'll know this, but for our listeners, everything I build, because I have other products in the pipeline beyond the Academy, operates our unique Make Love Not Porn model, which is what I call the human curation layer on top of the internet. Just as on Make Love Not Porn, there is no self-publishing of anything. Our curators watch every video from beginning to end before we approve or reject and we publish it. We review every profile post, every comment on every video before we approve, reject, and we publish it. Equally, on Make Love Not Porn Academy, we review every educator and every piece of content before we publish it.
Wow.
To make sure it's safe and we endorse it. Our criteria abroad on Make Love Not Porn, your video must be legal, consensual, and real. Beyond that, anything goes, because we exist to celebrate the full glorious spectrum of human sexuality. On Make Love Not Porn Academy, your content must be educational, fact-based, and non-judgmental. And then we'll take it. And by the way, that rules out a lot of very bad education content out there, like abstinence only education, for example.
Because is that considered judgmental? Is that why that?
A, that's judgmental, and B, that is not fact-based.
It's not fact-based.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's no way that I cannot ask this question. Everybody on the planet's fucking in love with AI. I'm so sick of AI. I never go into an interview where AI doesn't come up. Obviously, AI and anything related to sex has just been extraordinarily problematic. So, like, first, what's your view? What are you thinking about AI and sex?
Well, first of all, it's problematic because, AI is trained on what exists out there. We've already said what exists out there is extremely biased and problematic. So that's problematic. But secondly, I am all about HI-powered AI, human intelligence-powered artificial intelligence. And that is why my model for Make Love Not Porn Academy is everything is 100% human curated, with the intent that in due course we can train our own AI model on content that is completely not biased and not problematic, and be able to operate that.
Yeah, I would love to find a way that could somehow be adopted by the wine industry. So wine's really trying to get a handle on AI. And I have a lot of concerns about wine and AI because I feel like in some respects the thing that wine has going for it right now is it is slow, it is cultural, it is very hands-on. So I have gone on the record saying that I would hate to see wine adopting AI for anything that's really related to production. I know that I'm odd man out on that. But I also worry that without the human factor in it, that there's just no way to retain the confidence to say that what we do is without harm, that what we do has resonance, that what we do is empathetic, because I don't fundamentally believe that AI as it stands right now is capable of those three things. So,
well, I think the issue, Polly, really is that in many cases, AI is a solution in search of a problem. And
it's a tech bro in search of a dollar.
And every industry is going about this in the wrong way, which is, oh my God, got to be seen to be using AI. As opposed to, this is our mission as an industry, and now how are we going to achieve that mission? And might AI play a role in helping us achieve that mission? That's the way round it should be.
Agreed. Now, before I let you go, I have one question. I heard you talk about this at South by Southwest. I thought it was super, super interesting. Can you tell me about being deplatformed and debanked?
Oh, God. Honestly, I really thought in 2025 that, things would have improved, and they haven't. So for the benefit of our listeners, my tiny team and I fight a battle every single day, not even to grow Make Love Not Porn in the Academy, just to keep them alive. Basically because every piece of business infrastructure any other tech startup gets to take for granted, we can't, because the small print always says no adult content. And so, earlier this year, Make Love Not Porn was debanked 3 times in 2 months, which has to be some kind of record. 3 banks kicked us out, one after the other. Fortunately, we found a 4th bank. We are now okay. But I have to tell you, that was several incredibly stressful and very, very difficult months. And, our Instagram account for Make Love Not Porn was suspended with no reason given earlier this year. And when Instagram do that, they give you no recourse.
Yeah.
And so the only thing we could do was we just asked across all our social channels, we asked our entire Make Love Not Porn community, I asked all of my following to write to Instagram and tell them that this account had to be instigated. And I do know a huge number of people did that, and we're very grateful to them, because our account was suddenly magically restored. Again, nobody said anything about why, but it was back, thank God. And so, this shit is still going down in 2025. And that's why I believe in building solutions to my own problems. And Make Love Not Porn Academy is just the next product in a roadmap. It's about building infrastructure that solves my problems and everybody else's and enables me to make a shit ton of money out of that, because every business obstacle I encounter is a huge disruptive business opportunity in itself.
I think that that's so important, that what you've said really, really settles into everyone, to the people who are listening, because if you are in an industry, if the day should come that the alcohol industry is facing a lot of the same things that you're dealing with Make Love Not Porn, I do feel like that we need to be prepared for what are the solutions, how do we solve these problems internally. So we've got some years, God willing, before we have to worry too much about any of this, but we need to take control of the messaging right now. We need to actually have measures where we are instilling good values around consumption of alcohol for the people who are coming up through the generations as it is. And we can't be constantly responding to whatever is directly in front of us. We do actually have to be planning for how are we self-sustaining as an industry, because just like sex, we have a great product. We've got great audiences. We've been around forever. I think we go head to head on the two oldest professions in some sense. And it's not going anywhere. It's just, how do we actually get it in a positive way into the hands of the people who want it? And how do we make a shit ton of money doing it along the way? Thank you so much, Cindy. You're showing us, and for that, I appreciate your time.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And I will just say to our listeners too, that my consultancy and speaking services are available. So you can check me out at cindygallop.com and hit me up.
And I post all the time. I'm very open about the fact that I pay you for business advice, and it's some of the very best money that I ever spend. So I can cheerlead behind that. Well done. So you can I can tell all of them, you can consult about wine because you know all about our industry. You know all about advertising and marketing within our industry. So yes, I have your back on that. Thank you, Cindy.
Excellent. It's a pleasure.